You ever open up Steam Marketplace and realize, damn, maybe I don't need my second kidney?
Microtransactions and graphics, two things that go about as well together as bleach and ammonia. I've always heard people dismiss graphics as not being important, but considering that microtransactions and merchandise are absolutely massive moneymakers for game studios and publishers, it seems a little unfair. It's a little too easy to immediately dismiss microtransactions as inherently bad or as a great financial investment.
Surprisingly enough, according to this graph I just drew, the more money you spend, the more likely you are to be in that second camp. Must be sampling bias.
It's difficult to talk about microtransactions without talking about graphics, or more specifically the cosmetics they buy. Now, clearly there is more to microtransactions than just skins. I think it's simplest to divide them by type. Purely cosmetics serving no benefit to the player, cosmetics that provide a clear in-game benefit, cosmetics that exploit the K-pop community, and Minecraft servers, I mean pay to win. But to figure out why microtransactions work, we have to first understand why and how much people care about cosmetics. Don't worry, I'll talk about the exploitive practices that many Minecraft servers have
before the kidney surgery finishes. I never said before it would start.
So, graphics. Can we cut the bullshit and just agree we all like to see some pretty pixels? I mean, it's so important that anytime games are brought up by anyone over 20, they feel the need to specify that it's a video game. Like, that makes it any less valid as an artistic medium. And even before anyone plugged in an AV cable, people were buying posters or other pieces of art and other purely cosmetic items. So why is buying a set of pixels in a game frowned upon? I mean, other than the fact that you don't own it, and legally speaking are just renting your account, or that the game could shut down.
But honestly, what's the odds that would happen?
Even outside of microtransactions, graphics can have a massive impact on how a game is played. You see this? This is the impact that purely how a game looks can have on how people play games. I could not play Sid Meier's Civilization 6. Why is that? You may ask. Well, it's quite simple. It's too fucking bright. The game gives me a headache if I play for more than a few hours, which considering the entire point of Civ is to delete weekends, the subdued art style of 5 is massively preferred. Because how else am I supposed to stay up until 4 AM? Outside of impacting how long a game can be played, they impact two other things: the audience who might be interested, and the readability of the game. Matching the art style to the subject matter is really important outside of the Civ series. Imagine a game like Escape from Tarkov, with all of its super realistic bullshit, having Wind Waker graphics, it would seem confused. Alternatively, the readability of a game like Overwatch is really important to making decisions. And with all the new stuff added to the game, it becomes really difficult to tell what the fuck is happening. Like, how am I supposed to tell what is happening when there is a fucking forest surrounding people disappearing, and hundreds of damage and healing happening per second, so my goddamn health bar might as well be a cosmetic item? However, returning to microtransactions, let's first focus on all the ways that games will try to get us to part with our wallets, outside of pay to win. Loot boxes and gambling have mostly been killed in favor of battle passes, ever since the whole surprise mechanic debacle of 2019. But there is still a few holdouts. Valve. I'm talking about Valve. However, Valve has probably the most interesting way of handling skins in games. Mostly because you can actually play them like stocks. Like crypto. Like Enron. The market goes up and down. Mostly down. Per game. And I know a few people who made a few hundred off the skin trade in games like CSGO and Rust. However, buying loot boxes is decidedly gambling, and all research points to them being addictive, armed and dangerous, as well as doubling the suffering of anyone who is unfortunate enough to come in contact with them. In other words, the average description of me on a Tuesday. Despite this, most games are shutting down their more open market systems of item trade. Most notably, Rocket League entirely removed its vibrant trading scene recently. Maybe it makes the company less money, or maybe the bad press from having your largest content creators create gambling sites over your game, or maybe most of these games have massive investments from Tencent, or maybe, just maybe, it's because most countries are finally getting around to regulating child gambling in games.
Oh, don't mind me, I'm just checking to see if I won something from my state-sponsored lottery.
So moving on from one way to exploit people to another, the main way that most games monetize is through forced scarcity. In other words, you want that super cool mythic skin or whatever the fuck, and then spend the next 50 to 150 hours playing the game, and pretty much just this game in your free time for the next 30 to 90 days, and you will get it on the last day at 3 a.m. before the battle pass changes. I put in 20 hours a week and can barely get level 200 in Overwatch's battle pass each season. Even outside of battle passes, games will rotate things in and out of the shop every week. Each game handles it a little differently, but it is all to take advantage of people fearing they are going to miss out on their new favorite set of pixels, or worse, fearing they aren't going to be able to collect every skin in the game. It's a super dangerous mindset for players to get into, the whole collecting all of the skins in a game one. However, that is how games generate the most money. For what it is worth, there is more than one way to set prices in the stores. Mainly, prices changed based on how good it is or whether it's a collaboration, or the price can be static for all skins based on rarity, which is, for what it's worth, a lot better. Though it's the same way that vaping is better than cigarettes, by not.
Fuck.
It does mean that the normal skins are probably quite expensive, but it means I don't have to sell both my kidneys to buy a collaboration skin, just one. Though what is common between most games is their abstracting of money. It's not real money, it's Robux, or V-Bucks, or D-Sucks. But have you ever wondered why? When you are definitely not gambling at an under the legal minimum age, you're using chips. You always use chips. It's long been known that the less money looks like money, the more willing people are to spend on it. That's why not only the currencies aren't dollars, they're Wii Shop credits, or coins for the less creatively inclined. Additionally, most of the time they aren't a 1 to 100 or 1 to 1000 conversion, it's odd numbers. Not only does this mean you are less likely to think of it as money, but also means that you're more likely to have some left over. And do you really want to leave the equivalent of $6.50 on your account? Or do you want to put in $5 more to be able to buy that new skin? The currencies are designed to not only to make you not treat it like money, but also to make you have a consistent buy-in. That's why when you start a new game, you always start with some of the premium currency, or why you earn small amounts of premium currency during the game. It's an attempt to ensnare you by giving you a small taste of what you can get. Returning to the graphics talk, they often can determine what characters people try or relate to the most. People will at first pick up the characters that they find the most interesting or who is most like them. That is why characters like Reinhardt, D.Va, Genji, Tracer, and Mercy are known outside of the game, while characters like Torbjorn, Symmetra, or Bastion often aren't. Because are you a killer robot who achieves sentience in the middle of some woods?
Probably not.
A lot of people picked up their characters because this guy is cool or because she a gamer too, and those details are explained in their design. The thing is, you can see this not only there, but also with how many skins these characters receive. My point is twofold, that visuals will almost always have a massive impact on who is played, and no matter how many nerfs a character like Mercy receives, she will still be played. It's bordering on another conversation now, but characters who will have a massive one-trick population, like Mercy's, will always have a high win rate, because no one is flexing onto them, and so only the players who are good at them will be playing them.
My daily defense of Mercy over.
The other point is that the characters will receive more monetization because that character is popular, and especially if the character has a high amount of dedicated players, it's not surprising that that population of players will be exploited for more money. I mean, seriously, if you want to add up how much the Overwatch devs expected Mercy players to spend in this most recent season, it was nearly $50 to get all of what was released. Not to mention the re-released content from Overwatch 1 they were selling for another $20. The problem with microtransactions isn't necessarily that they exist, it's the fact that they make use of so many psychological exploitations that even after reading nearly 20 papers on the subject, there is still massive amounts of information missing that just hasn't had enough time to be researched. Most research on this stuff makes research on vaping look complete. My point is that the games industry moves at an incredibly fast pace, and because of this, all of the psychological entrapments don't even have enough time to be measured before some of their methods are found and commonized among all of the live service titles, meaning that consumer protections don't even have enough time to put the condom on before they get blueballed. That leads to the problem that despite all of this massive amount of research and information going against them, you can genuinely make the argument that microtransactions do benefit many of the games they are involved in. Is that ignoring a shit ton of counter arguments?
Yup.
But despite that, let's look at what those arguments could be. And I do apologize for returning to the game, but Overwatch is the perfect example. A game could not be more dead than the state it was at the end of Overwatch 1. For 2 years, there was basically no feature updates other than the final hero being added with Echo. And even then, the game was receiving basically no meta changes and was locked in double shield. And all the attempts to fix it were purely band-aid, not fixing anything but just choosing to ban heroes at random every week.
Yes, that was actually what happened. They had a fucking cat do it one time.
This affected the fucking pro-level teams in Overwatch League. What was once supposed to be the king of professional esports was at the whim of a fucking feline. The game featured loot boxes, but it wasn't like most other games. You could easily get a lot of them just by playing, which is something that players loved, but meant that the game was not able to make continuous money from them. Development at the level that the game had at release and in those first few years is really expensive, and while you could argue that keeping the game updated had value, when it comes to publicly traded companies, there is no value other than the short-term gains. No one cares about the long-term, and because of that and other issues, the game suffered. Not only from its dead PvE mode, we can contrast this with Overwatch 2, which for what it is worth does get content patches, does get collaborations, and does receive continued development. There is real benefit to games having continued profit throughout development, especially in games like Overwatch, where they need to continue making money to justify the upkeep of the game and its content. Additionally, when a player is making pre-planned purchases instead of impulse buys, the odds of them being dissatisfied with the purchase is significantly lower. However, with a more general outlook on microtransactions, it is clear that they create a lot of problems. And perhaps the most overlooked one is that they lock players down to one or just a few games. Think about it. Are you really going to jump ship from games that you spent hundreds of dollars on and thousands of hours completing the battle pass in? Just to go to a game you're not only not going to be good at first, but also without that
Investment.
you have in the original game, there's not really many reasons for people to jump to another game currently. And as I said, battle passes require a lot of time out of the player, which further leads to this almost parasocial relationship with the game you're locked into, where you need it far more than it needs you. Which kind of leads to this slippery slope, where once you spend some money, you are more likely to spend more because you have already started to fulfill the foot in the door. Or in other words, you accept a small request, which causes you to be far more likely to complete the larger request later. So what ends up happening is this sort of echo chamber, where the more you spend in the game, the more likely you are to put time and money into the game. If I were to go through every psychological exploit these games took advantage of, it would be near impossible. However, one that is near universal is the creation of scarcity. You ever wonder why the shops update weekly with only some items? Or why you can always see when the season's ending? Or why you're not able to see the chance of getting a golden knife in CSGO? The entire point is for you to feel like you have a chance to get in on the ground floor on something valuable. Okay, let's get to the comically large animal in the room. Pay-to-win microtransactions, otherwise known as shitty Minecraft servers, Roblox, and mobile games, or more simply as games your little cousin plays. Most of the pay-to-win Minecraft servers were either factions or prisons. Factions is basically just Rust for bitches. If Factions was Rust for pussies, Prisons is just Cookie Clicker in Minecraft, where servers have a chance to ask you for absurd amounts of money. Now, super recently, within the last few months, Mojang has finally cracked down upon pay-to-win servers, but they existed for nearly a decade before that, and will likely continue to exist inside and outside of Minecraft, so they are worth taking a look at. The most significant made over $25 million according to their own damn website. The prices for many of the items have been lost to time, but loot boxes were sold for over $100 a pop, along with ranks costing well into the hundreds. And those were tied to just 1/4 of the overall server, or just one of the 4 worlds. Remember, these were advertised near solely to children through whatever YouTuber owned the server. And there were dozens of these. I'm just describing one, but this applies to almost all of them. But just to show how egregiously bad the server was, even with Mojang's notoriously weak moderation, they were still banned as a server. And in response, they made a custom third-party client that the remaining members had to use to be able to join the server. Perhaps what is even worse is that in these videos where these servers are promoted, they openly state that they are using their server owner status to cheat stuff in, and giving themselves a weekly budget to spend on in-game loot boxes, in which I still remember watching someone spend the equivalent of over $1,000 in the first few minutes of a video. Except for they were the owner, so it cost them nothing. The kits that Ranks would give you were often so powerful that they could be immediately sold on the auction house for enough to buy some of the best stuff in the game, most notably spawners, the main economy of these servers, with ease. Along with having access to /fly, yep, that's perfectly fair as a free-to-play. Luckily, these servers have recently been shut down, but the amount of money they made for their owners is genuinely staggering, and their site states that they intend for it to return. This just shows how important it is to not allow pay-to-win games to exist or gain traction. Even outside of Minecraft, the two most pay-to-win things are targeted at either lonely adults with disposable income, or young impressionable children who have access to their parents' bank account on their iPad, with Roblox and mobile games. Whether it's Roblox or mobile games, they try to make the buy-in super easy. So when it comes to the second purchase, it's a question of, well, I spent this much so far, so what's a few more bucks? Especially considering the best way to make someone part with their sweet booty is to piss them off, requiring the player to either buy more energy to continue playing or to skip the level. Alternatively, it'll just give you a massive fuck-off timer, otherwise known as a paywall. It will slightly differ for most people. Personally, once it reaches an hour, I uninstall that piece of shit, but for most people it is after a timer is 3 days or so. But a terrifying statistic is that 6% of players who play pay-to-win games spend money on them. That may not be massive, but considering that these games have millions of downloads, doing the math,
A shit ton of legal tender.
So where does this leave us?
Broke.
Graphics can massively impact a game's success and ability to be sent between friends. Maybe the game doesn't need to look the best, but looking unique is a hell of a lot better than all the stale games that look near identical releasing every day. Graphics are a really important aspect of games that often get underplayed by anyone looking at game systems, but in reality, most people want to look at something that is pretty, and are much more likely to give a game like Ori a try than something like Chex Quest. Whether or not that's justified is not here or there, but it does massively factor into both what games people will play, as well as what characters people will potentially spend hundreds of hours playing. I might know a little bit about that second one. So I think it's time for me to circle back to the first question I wanted to answer.
How much is my kidney worth?
I mean, are microtransactions innately harmful? No, I truly don't think they are, and from a purely business perspective, they're likely the best bet for live service titles. I mean, the alternative is what, subscriptions? There's not many people who are going to say they preferred having to pay monthly for a game instead of having skins that are optional and getting something out of it. Though I guess buying a battle pass each season can be similar to a subscription. Sure, you can say that in the case of a game like Overwatch, they would be able to continue the old system of giving out skins for free, but I struggle to see a world in which people are willing to pay for a game monthly that isn't a massively addictive MMO that eats people's souls on a weekly basis. Microtransactions have been shown to perform wonders on games like Overwatch, and do a whole lot of nothing on games like TF2. Do all games, not just those, have kind of shitty implementations of microtransactions?
Yep.
So is there any way in which microtransactions could not be borderline psychological warfare? Yes. Would it be as profitable? Hell no, but it would be a hell of a lot more healthy and probably better for the game's long-term health. I think the most important thing is battle passes and loot boxes can be thrown in the dump. Gambling and requiring players to spend hundreds of hours isn't exactly an upstanding moral gent move. It is good that in most games you can earn its in-game currency. However, in-game currencies are a great way to abstract cost, so instead, why don't we replace the item's in-game cost with their actual price tag? And instead either give the players an ability to buy the game's premium version for say $60, like it's a full big box release, and then gain the ability to earn in-game currency, so that if they play, they can earn the skins, However, the choice is left up to the player, while each item has an in-game store cost and a real-life currency cost. From there, it would be simple to allow a player to earn skins through playing, if that is what they choose. And if a player wants to buy a skin, they can do so as well, allowing for more increased agency of the player and greater ability to retain players while still allowing a free-to-play to enjoy the game. Would it be massively profitable? No. It would make enough to likely make up for game development and keep the servers going, which in a healthy gaming space should be all that is needed. Maybe my kidneys are worth more than Mercy skins.
Shit, it's already out. I knew I should have gone to a second-rate barber for kidney removal. Should I have blacked out from